The desert sand felt like tiny needles against Sarah Chen's face as she crouched behind the concrete barrier. The sound of gunfire echoed through the air, mixing with the desperate shouts of wounded soldiers. Her hands moved quickly, checking her medical supplies one more time. As a Navy combat medic, she had trained for moments like this, but nothing could really prepare someone for the chaos of actual battle. Sarah had joined the Navy 3 years ago, fresh out of medical school. Her parents, both doctors themselves, had wanted her to follow a safer path. They imagined her working in a quiet hospital, treating everyday injuries and illnesses. Instead, she chose to serve her country, driven by a deep need to help those who risked everything for others. Her training had been intense, combining advanced medical knowledge with military tactics. She learned to save lives while bullets flew overhead, to remain calm when everything around her fell apart. The mission that day seemed routine at first. Their convoy was moving through a known safe zone in Afghanistan, transporting supplies to a forward operating base. Sarah sat in the back of the armored vehicle, reviewing medical protocols with her team. The desert landscape stretched endlessly in all directions, broken only by rocky outcroppings and the occasional village in the distance. The heat was unbearable, even inside the air-conditioned vehicle, and sweat constantly dripped down her face despite her best efforts to stay cool. Without warning, the world exploded around them. The lead vehicle hit an improvised explosive device, sending metal fragments and debris flying in all directions. The blast was so powerful that Sarah's vehicle was thrown sideways, rolling twice before coming to rest against a large boulder. Her ears rang painfully, and for a moment, she couldn't tell which way was up. Smoke filled the air, making it almost impossible to see or breathe properly. As her vision cleared, Sarah realized the magnitude of what had happened. The lead vehicle was completely destroyed, flames shooting high into the air. The third vehicle had taken heavy damage from the explosion, and she could see several soldiers stumbling around, clearly injured and disoriented. Worse yet, enemy fighters had positioned themselves on the surrounding hills, using the chaos to launch a coordinated attack on the remaining survivors. Sarah's training kicked in immediately. Despite the ringing in her ears and the sharp pain in her left shoulder, she grabbed her medical bag and began assessing the situation. Her own vehicle's crew was shaken but mostly uninjured, except for the driver who had a deep cut on his forehead from flying glass. She quickly bandaged his wound, then turned her attention to the more serious casualties scattered around the attack site. The enemy fire was getting closer and more accurate with each passing minute. Bullets ricocheted off the metal wreckage, creating sparks and adding to the chaos. Sarah had to make a difficult decision about where to focus her efforts first. Several soldiers needed immediate attention, but reaching them meant exposing herself to direct enemy fire. She took a deep breath, said a quick prayer, and made her choice. Moving from cover to cover, Sarah began reaching the most critically wounded soldiers. The first was a young private who couldn't have been more than 19 years old. Shrapnel had torn through his leg and he was losing blood fast. Sarah worked quickly, applying pressure to the wound while trying to keep both of them as low as possible. The boy kept asking if he was going to die, his voice shaking with fear and pain. As she worked on the private's injuries, Sarah noticed movement near the wreckage of the second vehicle. A figure in Navy SEAL gear was trapped under a piece of twisted metal, unable to move. Even from a distance, she could see blood pooling around him. The enemy fire was particularly concentrated in that area, making it extremely dangerous to approach. But Sarah knew that without immediate medical attention, the trapped SEAL would not survive. The SEAL was Petty Officer Marcus Rodriguez, though Sarah didn't know his name at the time. Marcus had been part of a special operations team that was traveling with the convoy for security purposes. When the explosion happened, he had been thrown from his vehicle and pinned under debris. A piece of shrapnel had punctured his chest and he was struggling to breathe. Every minute that passed made his situation more desperate. Sarah finished stabilizing the young private and handed him over to another medic who had arrived from a nearby unit. Without hesitation, she began planning her approach to the trapped SEAL. The direct route was impossible due to enemy fire, but she noticed a depression in the ground that might provide some cover. It would mean crawling nearly 50 yards under fire, but it was the only way to reach him in time. Loading her medical bag with everything she might need, Sarah began her dangerous journey across the battlefield. The heat from the burning vehicles was intense and the smell of smoke and fuel filled her lungs. Every few yards, she had to stop and wait for a break in the enemy fire. Bullets whizzed overhead, some coming so close she could feel the air move. Her heart pounded so hard she was sure everyone could hear it, but she kept moving forward. When Sarah finally reached Marcus, she could see immediately how serious his condition was. The shrapnel had created a sucking chest wound, and his breathing was becoming more labored by the minute. His eyes were still alert, though, and when he saw her approaching, he tried to speak. Sarah quickly assessed his injuries while keeping pressure on the chest wound. She knew she had to work fast, as his lung was likely collapsing from the trauma. Working under fire required a different kind of focus than anything Sarah had experienced before. She had to block out the sound of bullets hitting nearby rocks, ignore the shouting and explosions around her, and concentrate entirely on keeping Marcus alive. Her hands moved with practiced precision, inserting a chest tube to reinflate his collapsed lung while simultaneously working to stop the bleeding from multiple wounds. Marcus watched her work, amazed by her calm professionalism under such extreme conditions. Despite his pain and the chaos around them, he found himself studying her face, noting the intense concentration in her dark eyes and the steady movement of her hands. Even in that desperate moment, something about her presence made him feel safer, more hopeful about his chances of survival. The enemy fire intensified as Sarah worked to stabilize Marcus. She could hear the distinctive crack of sniper rifles joining the assault, meaning the attackers were becoming more organized and deadly. Every few seconds, bullets struck the metal debris around them, sending sparks flying and filling the air with the sharp smell of hot metal. Sarah forced herself to ignore the danger, focusing entirely on the medical procedures that would keep Marcus alive. Marcus's breathing was improving slightly with the chest tube in place, but Sarah could see other problems developing. His blood pressure was dropping dangerously low, indicating internal bleeding that she couldn't address in their current position. She needed to get him to a proper medical facility, but moving him while under fire would be extremely risky. The nearest safe zone was at least 200 yards away, across open ground that was completely exposed to enemy positions. Sarah used her radio to call for backup and evacuation support. The static-filled response was not encouraging. The attack had been larger than initially thought, with multiple enemy positions surrounding their convoy. Air support was at least 20 minutes away, and ground reinforcements were dealing with their own problems. For now, Sarah and Marcus were essentially on their own, trapped in a small pocket of relative safety while the battle raged around them. As she continued treating Marcus's wounds, Sarah noticed his military patches and insignia. He was clearly an experienced special operations soldier, probably with multiple deployments under his belt. Despite his injuries and the dangerous situation, his eyes remained alert and focused. When their eyes met, he tried to smile, though the pain made it more of a grimace. Sarah found his calm demeanor oddly comforting in the midst of such chaos. Marcus had been deployed to Afghanistan for 8 months, his third tour in the country. He had seen plenty of combat medics work under fire before, but never anyone quite like Sarah. Her movements were precise and confident, showing no hesitation despite the bullets flying around them. Most impressive was her complete focus on his medical needs, seemingly unaware of the personal danger she faced by staying with him. The situation grew worse when Sarah realized they were running low on medical supplies. She had used most of her emergency equipment treating other wounded soldiers before reaching Marcus. Looking around the battlefield, she spotted another medic's bag near one of the destroyed vehicles. Getting to it would mean leaving Marcus alone and exposing herself to direct enemy fire. But without those supplies, she wouldn't be able to keep him stable much longer. Sarah explained the situation to Marcus, who immediately shook his head as much as his injuries would allow. He tried to speak, his voice barely audible over the gunfire, telling her not to risk her life for additional supplies. But Sarah had already made her decision. She checked his wounds one more time, ensuring the chest tube was secure and the bleeding was controlled as much as possible. Then she prepared for another dangerous journey across the battlefield. The sprint to the medical supplies felt like the longest 30 seconds of Sarah's life. Enemy fire seemed to follow her every step, with bullets hitting the ground just inches from her feet. She dove behind cover near the destroyed vehicle, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. The medic's bag was partially buried under debris, and she had to dig frantically to free it while staying as low as possible. When Sarah returned to Marcus with the additional supplies, She found him trying to use his sidearm to provide covering fire for her return journey. Despite his serious injuries, he had managed to prop himself up enough to shoot at enemy positions, trying to keep them distracted while she ran back across the open ground. The effort clearly cost him, as fresh blood had appeared on his chest bandages, but his protective instinct had overridden his own physical limitations. Sarah immediately went back to work, using the new supplies to address Marcus's internal bleeding more effectively. She started an IV line to help stabilize his blood pressure and administered pain medication to help him manage the worst of his discomfort. As she worked, they could hear the distant sound of helicopters approaching, indicating that air support was finally on its way to help them. Marcus watched Sarah's face as she concentrated on his treatment. Even covered in dust and sweat, with her medical uniform torn and stained, she was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with physical appearance. Her dedication to saving his life, despite the obvious danger to herself, touched something deep inside him. He had met many brave people during his military career, but few had impressed him as much as this combat medic who refused to abandon him. The arrival of attack helicopters changed the dynamic of the battle significantly. Sarah could hear the sound of heavy machine guns as the aircraft engaged enemy positions on the surrounding hills. The intensity of incoming fire decreased noticeably, giving her hope that evacuation might finally be possible. She used her radio to coordinate with the helicopter crews, providing Marcus's medical status and location information. Within minutes, a medical evacuation helicopter was circling their position, looking for a safe place to land. The pilot's voice crackled over Sarah's radio, explaining that the landing zone was still too hot for a normal evacuation. They would need to use a cable system to lift Marcus directly from his current position, a procedure that would be dangerous under the best circumstances and potentially deadly while under enemy fire. Sarah began preparing Marcus for the cable evacuation, securing him to a specialized stretcher, and ensuring all his medical equipment was properly attached. She explained the process to him, trying to keep her voice calm and professional despite her own concerns about the risky procedure. Marcus nodded his understanding, then surprised her by grabbing her hand with what little strength he had remaining. Looking directly into her eyes, Marcus spoke with surprising clarity despite his injuries. He thanked her for risking everything to save his life, telling her that he would never forget what she had done for him. Sarah felt a strange flutter in her chest at his words, though she attributed it to the adrenaline and stress of the situation. She squeezed his hand briefly, then returned to her professional duties, ensuring he was ready for evacuation. The helicopter descended slowly, its downdraft creating a whirlwind of dust and debris. The cable operator lowered the rescue equipment while the aircraft's guns continued to suppress enemy fire from nearby positions. Sarah guided the cable hook to Marcus's stretcher, double-checking every connection while enemy bullets occasionally struck the helicopter's armored hull above them. As the helicopter began lifting Marcus away from the battlefield, Sarah felt an unexpected sense of loss. She had spent less than 2 hours with this wounded SEAL, but something about their shared experience under fire had created a connection she couldn't quite explain. She watched until the helicopter disappeared over the horizon, carrying Marcus toward the military hospital where surgeons would take over his care. 3 weeks passed before Sarah learned what happened to the SEAL she had saved. The forward operating base was busy with constant missions and medical emergencies, leaving little time for following up on individual patients. Sarah found herself thinking about Marcus more often than she expected, wondering if he had survived his surgeries and whether he would recover fully from his injuries. She had saved many lives during her deployment, but something about that particular rescue stayed with her. The answer came in an unexpected way. Sarah was working in the base medical clinic when her commanding officer approached with a serious expression. He handed her an official-looking envelope explaining that it had arrived through special military channels. Sarah's heart raced as she opened it, fearing it might be bad news about Marcus's condition. Instead, she found a handwritten letter that made her smile for the first time in weeks. Marcus had written the letter from his hospital bed in Germany, where he was recovering from multiple surgeries. His handwriting was shaky but readable, and his words were both grateful and surprisingly personal. He described his recovery process, mentioning that doctors had told him Sarah's quick thinking and medical skills had saved his life. Without her intervention, he would have died on that battlefield within minutes of being injured. The letter continued with Marcus sharing details about his background and family. He was originally from Texas, the son of a single mother who had worked 2 jobs to support him and his younger sister. His decision to join the Navy and become a SEAL had been motivated by a desire to serve others and make his mother proud. He had planned to make the military his career, but his current injuries might force him to reconsider his future plans. What touched Sarah most was Marcus's description of how her presence had affected him during those terrifying hours under fire. He wrote about feeling calm and safe despite the chaos around them, knowing that someone so skilled and dedicated was fighting to keep him alive. He mentioned details about her work that surprised Sarah, showing how closely he had been watching her even while seriously injured. Sarah found herself reading the letter multiple times, each time noticing something new in Marcus's words. He had included his contact information and expressed hope that they might stay in touch after both of their deployments ended. Sarah had never been one to form personal connections with patients, maintaining professional boundaries that kept her emotionally protected, but something about Marcus's letter made her want to respond. Over the following months, Sarah and Marcus began exchanging letters regularly. Their correspondence started formally, with updates about their respective recoveries and deployments. Sarah learned that Marcus was making good progress with his physical therapy, though he would never be cleared for active combat duty again. Marcus discovered that Sarah had been recommended for several military honors based on her actions during the convoy attack. Gradually, their letters became more personal. Marcus shared stories about his childhood in Texas, his close relationship with his mother and sister, and his dreams for life after the military. Sarah wrote about her family in California, her decision to become a combat medic, and her plans to pursue emergency medicine after her service ended. They discovered shared interests in hiking, photography, and classic movies. Sarah's deployment was scheduled to end 6 months before Marcus would return to the United States. As her departure date approached, both of them felt an increasing sense of urgency about their correspondence. They had developed a deep friendship through their letters, but neither was sure what would happen when they were both back home and could actually spend time together in person. The day before Sarah left Afghanistan, she received Marcus's longest letter yet. He wrote about how much their friendship had meant to him during his recovery, helping him stay positive through painful surgeries and difficult physical therapy sessions. He asked if she would be willing to meet him when he returned to the States, suggesting they could start as friends and see where their relationship might lead. Sarah spent her last night in Afghanistan writing her response to Marcus. She found herself being more honest about her feelings than she had been in any previous letter. She admitted that thinking about their correspondence had become one of the highlights of her difficult deployment. She agreed to meet him when he returned, though she was nervous about whether their connection would translate to real life. Returning to civilian life proved more challenging than Sarah had expected. After months of high-stress combat medicine, working in a regular hospital emergency room felt almost boring. She missed the intensity and purpose of military service, though she definitely didn't miss the constant danger. Her family noticed that she seemed distracted, often checking her phone for messages or sitting quietly with a distant expression. Sarah's parents were concerned about their daughter's adjustment to civilian life. They encouraged her to seek counseling if needed, and suggested she take time to rest before making major career decisions. Sarah appreciated their concern but found it difficult to explain that her distraction wasn't related to combat stress. Instead, she was counting down the days until Marcus would return from his extended medical recovery. Marcus's letters continued arriving regularly, now from various military hospitals in the United States where he was completing his rehabilitation. His physical recovery was progressing well, though he would always have some limitations from his chest injuries. More importantly, he was working through the emotional challenges of transitioning from active duty to civilian life, a process made more difficult by his forced medical retirement. Through their letters, Sarah learned that Marcus was struggling with his new reality. Being a Navy SEAL had been central to his identity for years, and losing that role left him feeling lost and uncertain about his purpose. He was considering various career options, from private security work to law enforcement, but nothing felt quite right. Sarah found herself offering encouragement and suggestions, helping him see his skills and experience from a different perspective. As Marcus's return date approached, Both he and Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. They had built a strong emotional connection through their correspondence, but meeting in person would be completely different. Sarah worried that they might not have the same chemistry face-to-face, while Marcus concerned himself with whether his injuries might change how she saw him. Sarah decided to take vacation time from her hospital job to ensure she would be available when Marcus arrived in California. He was being discharged from his final medical facility near San Diego, only a few hours' drive from Sarah's home. They had planned to meet at a quiet restaurant halfway between their locations, choosing a public place that would feel safe and comfortable for both of them. The night before their scheduled meeting, Sarah found herself unable to sleep. She had changed clothes 3 times, unsure what would be appropriate for such an important occasion. Part of her wondered if she was making a mistake by pursuing a relationship with someone she had only known through letters, but a larger part of her felt excited about finally meeting the man whose words had brightened her days for nearly a year. Sarah arrived at the restaurant 30 minutes early, choosing a table where she could see the entrance while still maintaining some privacy. Her hands shook slightly as she ordered coffee, and she found herself checking her reflection in her phone screen repeatedly. Despite months of correspondence, she realized she was about to meet Marcus as essentially a stranger. The man she had saved under fire might be completely different from the person who had written such thoughtful letters. Marcus walked through the restaurant door exactly on time, and Sarah recognized him immediately despite the significant changes from their battlefield encounter. He was taller than she remembered, with broad shoulders that filled out his casual button-down shirt nicely. His dark hair was longer now, and he moved with a slight favor to his left side, a permanent reminder of his injuries. But his eyes were exactly as she remembered them, warm, intelligent, and focused. When Marcus spotted Sarah, his face broke into a genuine smile that made her heart skip a beat. He walked over to her table with confident steps, and Sarah stood to greet him. For a moment, they stood awkwardly, unsure whether to shake hands, hug, or simply sit down. Marcus solved the dilemma by extending his hand formally, then breaking into a laugh at their mutual nervousness. Their conversation started hesitantly, both of them feeling the strangeness of hearing each other's voices in a normal setting. Sarah's voice was softer than Marcus had imagined, while his had a slight Texas accent that hadn't come through in his letters. They ordered lunch and began sharing stories about their transitions back to civilian life, gradually finding the natural rhythm that had characterized their written correspondence. Marcus described his final months of medical treatment, explaining how doctors had worked to repair the damage from his chest wounds. He would always have some breathing limitations and couldn't perform the physical demands required of special operations forces, but he was healthy enough for most normal activities. The hardest part had been accepting that his military career was over and figuring out what to do with the rest of his life. Sarah shared her own struggles with readjustment, particularly the way civilian medical emergencies seemed less urgent after combat medicine. She had been working in a busy emergency room, but found herself missing the intensity and clear purpose of military service. Her colleagues didn't understand why she seemed restless with what they considered an exciting and demanding job. As they talked, both Sarah and Marcus began to relax. The connection they had built through letters was definitely present in person, perhaps even stronger. They discovered that their shared military experience had created a unique understanding between them. Both had seen things that were difficult to explain to people who hadn't served, and both were struggling with similar questions about purpose and direction in civilian life. Marcus had been staying in a hotel near the medical facility where he completed his treatment, but his discharge meant he needed to make decisions about where to live permanently. His mother and sister were still in Texas, and part of him felt obligated to return there. But another part was drawn to California, where he could be closer to Sarah while exploring new career possibilities. Sarah found herself hoping Marcus would decide to stay in California, though she was careful not to pressure him. They had only just met in person, and she didn't want to complicate his life decisions with romantic expectations. But she couldn't deny that spending time with him felt natural and comfortable, in a way that surprised her. Their shared experience had created a foundation of trust that typically took much longer to develop. Their lunch lasted nearly 4 hours, with conversation flowing easily between serious topics and lighter moments. Marcus told funny stories about his physical therapy sessions, while Sarah shared amusing incidents from her work in the emergency room. They discovered mutual interests in hiking and photography, making tentative plans to explore some of California's national parks together. When it came time to leave the restaurant, neither wanted their meeting to end. Marcus suggested they take a walk along the nearby beach, and Sarah eagerly agreed. The afternoon sun was warm but not oppressive, and the sound of waves provided a peaceful backdrop for their continued conversation. Walking side by side, they both felt the comfortable companionship that had developed through months of letters. As they walked along the water's edge, Marcus stopped suddenly and turned to face Sarah. He thanked her again for saving his life, but this time his words carried deeper meaning. He explained that her letters during his recovery had given him hope and purpose when he was struggling with his new limitations. She had helped him see possibilities for his future that he couldn't have imagined on his own. Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes as she listened to Marcus speak. She had joined the military to help others, but saving Marcus had turned into something much more personal than she had ever expected. Their relationship had grown beyond the typical bond between medic and patient, becoming something that enriched both of their lives in unexpected ways. Marcus reached out and gently took Sarah's hand as they continued walking. The simple gesture felt natural and right, confirming what both of them had been sensing throughout their afternoon together. The connection they had built through letters was real and strong, with potential to grow into something even more meaningful. Over the following weeks, Marcus decided to relocate to California permanently. He found an apartment in the same city where Sarah worked, taking a job with a private security firm that valued his military experience. The work wasn't as exciting as his SEAL missions had been, but it provided good income and used his skills in a meaningful way. More importantly, it allowed him to be near Sarah while they explored their developing relationship. Sarah and Marcus began spending time together regularly, starting as friends but gradually becoming something more. They hiked mountain trails on weekends, sharing stories and taking photographs of scenic views. Marcus proved to be an excellent cook, preparing elaborate dinners when Sarah was exhausted after long shifts at the hospital. Sarah helped Marcus navigate the challenges of civilian life, offering perspective and encouragement when he felt frustrated with his limitations. Their relationship developed slowly and naturally, built on the strong foundation of trust and understanding they had established through their correspondence. Both had been through intense experiences that made them appreciate the value of genuine connection. They didn't rush into romance, instead allowing their friendship to deepen gradually into something more intimate and lasting. Marcus surprised Sarah by showing her letters she had written during his recovery, carefully preserved in a folder he had carried throughout his medical treatment. Reading her own words from months earlier, Sarah was struck by how much their relationship had grown and changed. What had started as professional concern had evolved into deep affection and mutual support. Sarah kept Marcus's letters as well, rereading them occasionally to remember how their connection had developed. His words had provided comfort during her own difficult adjustment to civilian life, and she realized that their correspondence had been beneficial for both of them. They had helped each other heal not just from physical wounds, but from the emotional challenges of leaving military service behind. 2 years after their first meeting at the restaurant, Sarah and Marcus had built a life together that neither had expected when they first started writing letters. They had moved in together after 18 months of dating, finding an apartment that was convenient to both of their jobs. Marcus had been promoted to a management position with his security firm, while Sarah had specialized in emergency trauma medicine, using skills developed during her military service. Their relationship was built on a foundation of mutual respect and understanding that came from their shared military experience. Both had seen the worst that life could offer, which made them appreciate the peaceful moments they shared together. They didn't take their happiness for granted, knowing how quickly circumstances could change and how precious their time together really was. Marcus had maintained his physical fitness despite his breathing limitations, adapting his exercise routine to work within his medical restrictions. Sarah often joined him for morning runs along the beach, though she had to push herself to keep up with his pace. They both found that physical activity helped them manage the stress of their demanding careers while providing time to talk and connect. Sarah's parents had initially been cautious about her relationship with Marcus, worried that dating someone with combat-related injuries might complicate her own adjustment to civilian life. However, meeting Marcus in person had quickly changed their opinion. They saw how happy and stable their daughter had become, and they appreciated Marcus's respectful and caring treatment of Sarah. He had become a welcome addition to family gatherings and holidays. Marcus's mother and sister had visited California several times to meet Sarah, and they had been equally welcoming. His mother was particularly grateful to Sarah for saving her son's life, though she was careful not to make their relationship feel burdened by that obligation. She could see that what Sarah and Marcus shared went far beyond gratitude. Representing genuine love and compatibility, the couple had developed routines and traditions that reflected their personalities and shared interests. Saturday mornings were reserved for hiking in nearby mountains, where they would pack lunches and spend entire days exploring new trails. Sunday evenings were for cooking elaborate meals together, experimenting with cuisines from around the world. They had turned their apartment into a comfortable space filled with photographs from their adventures and mementos from their military service. Sarah had considered pursuing additional medical training that would allow her to work in more challenging environments, possibly with disaster relief organizations or international medical missions. Marcus supported her ambitions while expressing some natural concern about the dangers such work might involve. Their conversations about her career goals were always honest and thoughtful, with both of them acknowledging the importance of finding meaningful work. Marcus had been thinking about starting his own security consulting business, using his military experience to help other veterans transition into civilian careers. He had seen too many former service members struggle with finding purpose after leaving the military, and he wanted to create opportunities for them to use their skills in valuable ways. Sarah encouraged his entrepreneurial ambitions, offering to help with the business planning and financial aspects. Their friends often commented on how well-suited Sarah and Marcus seemed to each other. They complemented each other's strengths while supporting each other through challenges. Sarah's calm professionalism balanced Marcus's natural intensity, while his steady presence helped ground her when work stress became overwhelming. They had learned to communicate openly about their needs and concerns, preventing small problems from becoming major issues. One evening in late spring, Marcus seemed unusually nervous during dinner. Sarah noticed that he kept checking his watch and seemed distracted by something on his mind. When she asked about his mood, he deflected her questions with jokes and changes of subject. Sarah assumed he was stressed about a work project and didn't press the issue, though she remained curious about his unusual behavior. After dinner, Marcus suggested they take a walk on the beach where they had spent their first afternoon together 2 years earlier. Sarah agreed eagerly, always enjoying their evening walks along the water. The sunset was particularly beautiful that evening, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. They walked hand in hand, talking about their day and making plans for the upcoming weekend. When they reached the spot where Marcus had first taken Sarah's hand during their initial meeting, he stopped walking and turned to face her. Sarah noticed that his hands were shaking slightly, and his expression was more serious than usual. For a moment she worried that something might be wrong with his health or that he was having second thoughts about their relationship. Marcus took both of Sarah's hands in his and began speaking, in a voice that was emotional but steady. He told her that meeting her had changed his life in ways he never could have imagined. Before their relationship, he had been struggling to find purpose and direction after his military career ended. Sarah had helped him discover new goals and dreams that made civilian life meaningful and exciting. Sarah felt her heart beginning to race as she realized where Marcus's speech was leading. She had thought about marriage occasionally, but they had never discussed it directly. The timing felt both surprising and perfect, coming at a moment when their relationship was strong and their future plans were aligned. She listened carefully to every word Marcus spoke, wanting to remember this moment forever. Marcus explained that he had been carrying something in his pocket for several weeks, waiting for the right moment to share it with her. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box, dropping to one knee on the sand where they had walked so many times before. Sarah gasped and covered her mouth with her hands, tears forming in her eyes as she realized what was happening. Opening the box to reveal a beautiful but modest diamond ring, Marcus asked Sarah to marry him. His proposal was heartfelt and personal, referencing their unique beginning and the way their love had grown from the most unlikely circumstances. He promised to love and support her through whatever challenges life might bring, drawing on the strength they had already proven they possessed together. Sarah's answer was immediate and enthusiastic. She had never been more certain about anything in her life than she was about wanting to spend her future with Marcus. Through tears of joy, she said yes while he slipped the ring onto her finger. They stood together on the beach, holding each other tightly while waves crashed nearby and the sun continued its descent toward the horizon. The engagement ring was perfect for Sarah's practical nature, beautiful but not ostentatious, suitable for someone who worked with her hands in a medical setting. Marcus had chosen it carefully, considering her personality and lifestyle rather than simply buying the most expensive option available. Sarah appreciated the thought he had put into selecting something that truly reflected who she was. As they walked back toward their car, Sarah couldn't stop looking at the ring on her finger. The reality of being engaged was still sinking in, filling her with excitement about planning their wedding and building their future together. Marcus seemed relieved and happy that his proposal had gone well, admitting that he had been nervous about the timing and setting, despite being confident about Sarah's feelings. The wedding planning process revealed new aspects of both Sarah and Marcus's personalities that deepened their appreciation for each other. Sarah, despite her organized nature in medical settings, felt overwhelmed by the countless decisions involved in planning a wedding. Marcus surprised her by taking charge of many details, researching venues and vendors with the same methodical approach he had used in military operations. They decided on a small ceremony that would reflect their shared values and military background. The guest list included family members, close friends from their civilian lives, and several military colleagues who had served with them during their deployments. Sarah wanted to invite the other medics who had worked with her during the convoy attack, while Marcus reached out to surviving members of his SEAL team who were able to travel. The venue they chose was a beautiful garden location overlooking the Pacific Ocean, not far from the beach where Marcus had proposed. The setting was elegant but not formal, allowing guests to feel comfortable while providing a stunning backdrop for their ceremony. Sarah and Marcus wrote their own vows, drawing on their unique love story and the experiences that had brought them together. Sarah's wedding dress was simple and classic, chosen more for comfort and practicality than elaborate fashion. She wanted to be able to move freely and enjoy her wedding day without worrying about complex dress requirements. Her hair was styled in an elegant updo that showcased the pearl earrings Marcus had given her as an engagement gift, a family heirloom from his grandmother. Marcus wore his navy dress uniform for the ceremony, with his chest full of ribbons and decorations earned during his years of service. Sarah had requested that he wear his military uniform, wanting their wedding photos to reflect the experiences that had shaped both of their lives. His appearance in uniform reminded everyone present of the sacrifices both bride and groom had made in service to their country. The wedding ceremony was officiated by a Navy chaplain, who had served with Marcus during one of his earlier deployments. The chaplain incorporated elements that acknowledged their military service, while focusing on the love and commitment they were making to each other. Sarah's parents and Marcus's mother and sister served as witnesses, with tears in their eyes as they watched the couple exchange vows. When Sarah and Marcus spoke their vows to each other, there wasn't a dry eye among their guests. They spoke honestly about the unusual way their love had developed, from a life-or-death situation on a battlefield to a peaceful garden ceremony surrounded by family and friends. Their words reflected the depth of understanding and appreciation they had developed for each other over the years. The reception was held in an adjacent garden area, with tables arranged under string lights that created a warm and intimate atmosphere. The food was a mixture of both Sarah's Chinese heritage and Marcus's Texas background, reflecting their diverse family traditions. Dancing continued late into the evening, with the couple clearly enjoying every moment of their celebration. During the reception, several guests gave toasts that highlighted different aspects of Sarah and Marcus's relationship. Sarah's father spoke about how proud he was of his daughter's military service, and how happy he was to see her with someone who truly understood her experiences. Marcus's mother talked about how Sarah had not only saved her son's life but had helped him find new purpose and happiness in civilian life. One of the most moving speeches came from the young private whose life Sarah had saved during the same convoy attack where she met Marcus. He had recovered fully from his injuries and was now working as a paramedic in his hometown. He credited both Sarah and Marcus with inspiring him to pursue a career in emergency medical services, showing him how military skills could be adapted to help civilians. The couple's first dance was to a song they had chosen together, one that reminded them of their early correspondence and the hope they had shared during difficult times. As they moved slowly around the dance floor, surrounded by the warm glow of the string lights and the love of their family and friends, both Sarah and Marcus felt overwhelmed by gratitude for the journey that had brought them to this moment. After their honeymoon trip to Hawaii, where they spent 2 weeks hiking, swimming, and simply enjoying being together without any outside pressures, Sarah and Marcus returned to their regular lives with a new sense of partnership and shared purpose. They had used their time away to discuss their long-term goals and dreams, making plans for the next phase of their lives together. Marcus had decided to move forward with starting his own business, providing security consulting and career counseling for military veterans. Sarah planned to support his entrepreneurial efforts while continuing her work in emergency medicine. They talked about eventually starting a family, though they agreed to wait a few years while they established their careers and enjoyed their time as newlyweds. Their story had become somewhat famous within their military community, with Sarah and Marcus occasionally being invited to speak at veteran events about their experiences. They were always careful to emphasize that their love story, while dramatic, was built on the same foundations as any successful relationship: mutual respect, shared values, and commitment to supporting each other through life's challenges. 5 years after their wedding, Sarah and Marcus had achieved most of the goals they had set during their honeymoon planning sessions. Marcus's business was thriving, helping dozens of veterans find meaningful civilian careers. Sarah had completed additional training in trauma surgery and was working at a major hospital's emergency department. They had purchased a house near the beach where they continued to take evening walks. Their love story served as an inspiration to other military couples, showing how shared service and mutual support could create lasting relationships. Sarah and Marcus never forgot that their connection had begun in the most unlikely circumstances, with bullets flying and death threatening. That dramatic beginning had taught them to value every peaceful moment they shared and never take their happiness for granted. The convoy attack that brought them together had lasted only a few hours, but its impact on their lives continued to grow stronger with each passing year. Sarah had kept Marcus alive through enemy fire and medical emergencies, but he had given her something equally valuable in return: a love built on complete trust, understanding, and appreciation for the person she truly was. Their wedding day had been the celebration of a promise that began on a battlefield and would last for the rest of their lives together.